and I'm here with Rotterdam, which all of you probably know, and also Kim Fan, someone who you might not know. Kim Fan, can you introduce yourself to the community?
Hi, I'm Kim, and I am a senior esports manager at Blizzard Entertainment.
And who are you?
Hi, I'm Kevin van der Kooi, also known as Rotterdam, and I used to play a lot of Warcraft, and these days I like to talk about StarCraft.
So this interview is going to be more of a casual thing where we can't talk too much about WCS, but we're going to talk and reminisce about the old Warcraft 3 days. So Kim, how did you get started in the esports community?
So I've known Rotterdam now for a long time. I started off in Warcraft 3 in the esports scene, and used to play a lot of Warcraft 3. That was my game. Probably still my favorite RTS of all times is Warcraft 3, and went by the handle Bunny, and that's how Rotterdam knew me. It was as Bunny. Ran a Warcraft 3 fan site called WC Replays and commentated a lot of Warcraft 3. So I'm really excited to talk more about Warcraft 3 because it's been a long time.
So I know you don't want to brag about Warcraft 3 WCReplays.net, but Rotterdam, how big was WCReplays.net in the Warcraft community?
WCReplays.net was basically the Team Liquid. What Team Liquid is for StarCraft 2 and what Team Liquid was for Brood War, that is what WC Replays was for Warcraft 3. Even though there was another site as well called Replayers.com, but that one was really focused on the replays, while WCReplays.net was a little bit of everything. It had the community, it had the how did we call it?
Audio commentary.
Audio commentaries,
and it was WCReplays.com, just to correct you guys.
And,
there's no .net.
And,
Yes, it was replays.net where you can download all these amazing replays, and then WCReplays.com was replays with replays analysis. There was written articles, news, audio commentary, audio interviews.
It was Team Liquid of Warcraft 3.
There was a lot of content.
Yes, it was awesome.
So in one way, you could call yourself the Nazgul of Warcraft 3.
Nazgul has done way more than I've ever done, so I can't compare myself to him.
I think Kim undervalues herself there, because that's actually exactly how Mr. Bitter described Kim not too long ago. And then I thought about it and I was like, yeah, I guess that's kind of correct, because Kim had put a lot of effort into WC Replays, and it was very important for the Warcraft 3 community, and even for players like me, that site was around. If that site wasn't there, there was definitely a void that wasn't filled. So Kim, you did a good job.
Thank you.
But most people know you from your casting in Warcraft 3. Actually, you started off being the face. You started off as one of the first casters of Warcraft 3. The most memorable game I have is you casted Zacard versus Grubby. Can you describe to me that instance?
So BlizzCon 2005 was the first time I ever casted in front of a live audience. So way back then there was no Twitch, there was no YouTube, there was no video at all. So we just did shoutcasting on Winamp, and so people could only hear my voice. And so BlizzCon was the first time I had ever casted in front of an audience. And that match you talked about took place there. It was the finals between 4K Grubby and SK Zacard. And probably one of my most memorable casts ever, and probably one of the best Warcraft 3 games that I have ever seen. I don't know if Rotterdam agrees or not, but it was a great game. You saw heroes that were rarely ever used. Grubby had did a misclick. He wanted to get the Fire Lord, and O is really close to L, and he accidentally clicked for the Pit Lord. And so Zacard saw that he picked a Pit Lord at the neutral tavern and just thought, oh, so this is this kind of game. You're going to do something very different. So he's like, okay, I'll pick the Alchemist. And nobody uses the Alchemist nor the Pit Lord. And so the game lasted a very long time. Both heroes maxed out. And I believe Grubby won the match with the Pit Lord's ultimate, which was Doom. And he took down the Alchemist. I mean, Rotterdam has a way better memory than I do, but that match was very memorable for me.
We'll talk about Rotterdam's memory later, but what do you remember about those games?
I remember watching them as well, and just sitting at home and being still very young but very excited about Warcraft, and I was just kind of like getting all hyped because I couldn't believe what I was watching. I was already getting quite good at that point, not as good as Grubby and Zacard, but I was in the lift, in the elevator, I was getting better each day, and that game, it just made no sense to me what I was seeing, but I was loving it, and I think it stands out at least most spectacular Warcraft 3 game of all time. Also because of on the stage that it was played. Like it was a BlizzCon final. It doesn't get much bigger than that. And then we suddenly see these two heroes we never see, and they actually both get level 6, which is the magic level in Warcraft. So it was something special for sure.
And I also remembered casting was the first time I had ever casted. So I was in a little podium, a little desk. This is when I was solo casting, so I didn't have like a casting partner. I had to talk the entire time, and they didn't have headsets, so they just gave me a hand mic like this, and so I had to cast like one hand on the mouse and one hand holding the mic. So I couldn't even hit the Alt key at the time to show health, and so I just remembered this is literally how I casted. I casted talking like this, and then only having a mouse, and it was very challenging, but it was very fun.
That also reminds me, during that cast, people started to know you more for your unit sound imitations. Can you show us some of them right now?
I think they knew me for that before that cast, because I used to cover a lot of tournaments. WC3L was one of the leagues that I covered all the time, and I don't know how it happened. I think there was some audio problems and you couldn't hear the game sounds, and so I decided to mimic all of the death sounds that were happening. And the one that is the hardest to mimic is the null, and I don't know how I could do it, and that was the one that everyone always wanted to hear me do, is the null death sound. And I don't know if I could still do it, but it kind of sounds like that, right?
Spot on. Spot on.
I'm sure, yeah.
There's different nulls too, so there was one that was like deeper sounding and some that were higher sounding. It's like, and it's like,
The bigger.
I'm surprised I can still do that, but yes.
It's still pretty good, right? Now, I'm just reminded that you two are two of the premier casters of Warcraft 3. And I did an interview with Todd. I'm sure you watched that. I saw you tweet about it. That he said we basically concluded that he got you into casting, and you owe him so much. What do you think about that?
No, that's not true. I indeed watched every minute of that interview. And Johan, yes, that he got me to GomTV for the Warcraft 3 invitation in 2009 in Korea, that was definitely a big deal. But as Johan said as well in that interview, so don't try to turn the roles, I was casting a little bit before that as well. I did the NGL finals, I did the WC3L finals. I think I had 1 or 2 IEM casts. Back then we were not flown out to the events. It was just me driving in my car from Rotterdam to Cologne to the ESL studios and talking about the Warcraft that was played somewhere else around the world, because we just did it from the studio in Germany. But yeah, the GomTV World Invitational I did together with Todd, and the only reason why I did that was indeed because of Johan. That was definitely something that a lot of people remembered, and I really had so much feedback. Like, we didn't have Twitter or Facebook back then, but if we would have had, I'm sure that we would have had like hundreds of tweets every single day, because the sites like Read More, SK Gaming, they were all full of the tournament, and it was very well received.
Now, I know there aren't many international Warcraft 3 tournaments these days, but hypothetically, if there were ones somehow to pop up magically, would either of you consider casting it maybe?
I definitely think it would be Rotterdam that was casting. I think he pretty much took over the reins like when I started to disappear. Ever since I took a job at Blizzard, I just didn't cast as much anymore. And in fact, the only events I ever casted were Blizzard events, because I was working for Blizzard. And pretty much every other event was covered by Rotterdam. And also even DeMuslim casted with you, right? Yeah, so DeMuslim and Rotterdam started casting. So I think if there was a Warcraft 3 tournament now, I mean, this guy would still be your guy. Maybe even Todd, since Todd is casting now. I totally bet he could also cast Warcraft 3, but I think my casting days are way, way over.
Yeah, I've said this many times. Well, on my stream, often people ask as well, like, "Hey, Roddy, if there's a Warcraft event, or if this team asks you to cover that event, would you do it?" And if I'm available, I would always do it. I had so much fun covering all the Warcraft events. I can't remember a single trip that I ever made and not having fun. It's also funny when you compare being a commentator in StarCraft and in Warcraft. Like these days, a lot of people talk about like, oh, the casters are so rich in StarCraft, which isn't even necessarily the case. But it's even more fun when I think about the Warcraft days. It was like a tournament in China. It's like, hey, would you be interested in covering this event? We don't have enough money to pay you, but we can fly you out there. And I was like, yeah, free trip to China, let's go. So, you just flew around the world, even though it cost you money rather than that it actually gave you money. But it was always a lot of fun. And later on, I started working with Red Eye on a few tournaments, and I've always had so much fun casting Warcraft, so I would always do it if I'm available.
And just to be at those events in itself were amazing. I think that even if I wasn't casting, I think Kevin feels the same way. Just to attend those events was just epic. And the other day, I think we were just talking. I was asking Kevin, when was the first time we ever met? Because I actually didn't remember. I'm like, when did I first meet you? And his memory is so good. He remembers way more than I do. And this is a funny story. The first time I ever met Kevin or Rotterdam was in WWI in Korea, 2006. And he was wearing, the first time he had to wear this little pro gamer spacesuits. I don't know if you remember those Korean spacesuits, like Freak had to wear it, Rotterdam had to wear it. And I was invited out to cast the English cast there. And so that was the first time I had ever met him. And I didn't remember that, but you told me that. He said it was the most memorable event for him, and you still have that tracksuit?
Yep, I still have the pro gamer suit. But even when they gave it to me back then, it was already way too small for me. Like my legs were way too long for it, so it came up like somewhere between my knees and my ankles, which it looked horrible, but I was still very proud of it. And yeah, I will never forget that event because
your Halloween costume this year.
But yeah, I actually lost 2-0 against Freak, the very famous League of Legends commentator now.
Freak!
And I still remember the games as well. It's actually giving me nightmares, like how bad those games played out. For the Warcraft 3 fans out there, he used cloak on his archers to block the entrance of my own base. So he had like archers in my main, and I couldn't enter, and I had no reveal. It's just, I was so sad. I couldn't believe what happened because I was supposed to beat Freak. I was better than Freak. If you're watching Freak, sorry, but I was supposed to beat you.
And he was so proud of that win.
Oh, he
against
can.
You.
Even whenever I meet Freak these days, he's like, "Hey, you remember Korea?" Yes, Freak, I remember Korea.
Well, Rotterdam, you're from the Netherlands, which also houses another famous Warcraft 3 player.
No.
Do you know about this? Well, you often in national qualifiers there would be ESWC and WCG and all these other qualifiers each year, and you would always have to play Grubby in the finals. And well, how did those go? Because I know you actually you won one time, right?
Well, specific qualifiers, not really, but there was a period where I was indeed going very well against Grubby. But yeah, there was a story, it was kind of the story of my life, like just always playing against Grubby. And in the start, you know, I was already excited to play Grubby because back then the whole esports phenomenon in general just excited me so much that the fact that I even got to talk to Grubby, well, that was the player that I looked up to. I mean, in 2003 and WCG when Grubby won, I was listening on audio via Winamp where Bunny was casting, and I just like, man, this is like the most amazing thing ever. I wish I could be part of this. And 2 years later, I'm playing him on the national stage. So yeah, I lost most of the national qualifiers, but there was a certain time in my career where I was very good at PvP, Orc vs Orc, which is kind of similar to PvP. But yeah, I was very good at Orc vs Orc. So even though I missed a lot of the big events, like it took me a while to get to WCG until they said like, hey, we're gonna send 2 guys, and I was like, yes. And ESWC was run by the guys of GameLux back then, which were a relatively big site in the Benelux scene, Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg. And they often said like, we're gonna send 2 players to ESWC because we think you deserve a chance as well. So in the national qualifiers, Grubby had my number most of the time, but there were a few occasions where I was able to beat him as well.
You're also known as a very stylistic player in Warcraft 3. The one hero that you enjoyed more than everyone else was the Farseer, when everyone else was abusing those Imba Claw Blade Masters. Why did you decide to choose the Farseer and not stick to the tried and true Blade Master?
Well, if you would ask Johan what he thinks about me, he would probably say that I'm a nice guy, but I'm the most stubborn person in the world. And I think that is very reflected in the way I play games. I've been doing the same opening in PvP and StarCraft 2 for a long time. And in Warcraft 3, I just kind of refused to change my style, which when I look back at it, I'm actually really sad about it because I felt end 2005, early 2006, I was very good and I was beating amazing players. And that was right when the Blade Master switch hit. And I should have just adapted. And I did adapt on the fountain maps because I just realized, okay, this is impossible to play Farseer here. And I actually got extremely good in Blade Master vs. Blade Master on the fountain maps. But what I just did not want to accept is that I had to wall off my base on non-fountain maps in Blade Master Wars, in Orc vs. Orc. And I just tried to be special. I was stubborn, and above all, it was the fact that, okay, if I'm going to change my style now, I'm going to lose games for a while against players that I'm still going to be able to beat with Farseer. Even when I know it's just a worse strategy, I'm still going to be able to beat these guys. But I should have just taken a step back and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to learn how to play effectively with Blade Master, and I'm going to take a few losses against players that I'm supposed to beat, and this is going to suck for a month or two. But after that, I'm going to beat those guys again, and I will still be able to compete with the guys that I'm supposed to compete with. But instead, I was stubborn, and I said, like, I just don't want to lose against a certain level of players, which Farseer still allowed me because I was still very good with it. But the upper echelon, like, they just had an edge on me, and I gave that away by being stubborn in my playstyle.
Not many people know, but Kim, you also played Warcraft 3. What race did you play, and how good were you? And was there anything that you were there any stories that you like to share?
I did play a lot. It was definitely my favorite game. I laddered all the time. My favorite, I would say, was 2v2. So I always played 2v2 with anybody that would play, and that was probably my strongest. My most memorable was probably competing in WC3L when I was in United 5. Our clan actually made it and qualified, and one of our players, I guess, didn't show up. It was Quasi, and so his normal 2v2 partner was Yahi, and he wasn't there, and so the only person that could sub in was me. And so that was my first time to actually compete in a 2v2, and we won that match. So I was the first and only, I guess, female to win a WC3L match. So yeah, my strongest was 2v2. I was ranked 1 in 2v2, 3v3, 4v4, all of that. Like AT games were my strength. Solo, I played a lot. I just wasn't strong enough to be like professional by any means. But I played. Oh, I never answered your question. I played Human. Human was my my favorite class. Always open with the Archmage and then the Mountain King second.
So pretty standard, right? Did you learn from? Did Todd ever try to teach you?
I did play a lot with Todd as well, and normally I would just pick up what he did. I don't think that he ever really trained me, but he was another person I played a lot of 2v2 with. So it was always very close to all the Four Kings guys, especially just because I did a lot of interviews and did a lot of coverage of Four Kings for WC replays, and so I was very close to them with Todd and Grubby and Sakard and Fav and Zeus. Like really, those guys were great.
So you mentioned that you were on U5. Were you the manager of U5?
Yeah. So I also managed that team as well. I always basically set up all of the lineups. So for WC3L, the manager always had to send in all the lineups. So every week before our WC3L match, I would watch all the replays of our opponents and studied what maps they played on, what races they were really strong and weak, and then I would try to predict what the other team manager was going to place them on, and then I always did the lineup. And so the team just, and I always worked with Newbie too. He was our captain at the time, and so yeah, that was something I guess I did.
So you really were underselling yourself before, because you are both ran WC replays and you ran a team. So you really are like Nazgul, right?
I don't know. I feel like Nazgul. I just can't compare myself to him. I met him for the first time at Gamescom for the WCS Season 2 finals. He's a really amazing guy and very smart. So I don't know that I can compare myself to him. So.
No, I would like to actually comment on what he said before, which I thought was one of the coolest things that we kind of missed in StarCraft 2. The fact that managers played more than a role of just booking a hotel and booking a flight. It was so cool to actually, managers were not stars, but you know, they were kind of like, oh, that guy's a really good manager because he's able to predict who's going to play on which map. And I thought that was just one of the coolest things of those throughout. It was so exciting because you kind of relied on your manager that he would seed you in the right map, and like, we had a manager called Trimble, and actually he was considered to be a talented manager. When you think about it, it's kind of silly, but it was a really good time, and those guys actually did make the difference. Or Kim was able to seed pretty good as well, and matchups were everything, because you know, there was a while if you seed me in Orc vs Orc, I was going to win, like regardless who I played. But if you put me against Night Elf, then you know, I was going to have a much harder time, or against Human especially. So
yeah, and also just casting as much as I did. So I also watched a lot of games just from casting. So I knew when I was really into Warcraft 3, I could almost tell you every single time what strategy a player was going to go based on the map and based on his race opponent, just because I saw so many matches and casted so many. And I think that was at my peak of casting. I could pretty much tell you exactly what was going to happen before it happened. And determining on who was going to win was depending if anyone made a mistake or not. But other than that, I knew all of that stuff. And then after time, when the strategies changed, it was really hard to keep up with it. But yeah, I lived and breathed Warcraft 3. It was my baby.
Now, we mentioned earlier that Rotterdam has a really good memory of Warcraft 3, so we're going to play a little game now to test that.
How would you know you're even right? Because his memory is so good.
Because...
Oh, you're cheating.
No, you guys are going to guess, and I'm going to ask you questions.
If I'm competing against him, I'm gonna lose for sure. Like, there's no way.
We'll see,
Like,
we'll see.
I've already lost several bets to him that he hasn't made me fulfill yet.
All right, let's start with something easy. Who won WEG Masters?
My memory is crap. So, what year?
I think the first one, WEG Masters 1.
WEG.
WEG.
You already know?
I think it's. Well,
I'm gonna guess first. I don't know. I'm just pulling someone who always won a lot. Moon.
I think it's Todd.
It is Todd. He beat
I don't know. I mean,
yeah, he beat Grubby in the finals.
Sky in the semi-final. Actually, I've really been. Normally, I watched almost every single pro Warcraft 3 tournament, but that was on a really bad time zone, and I still had to go to college. So I remember I was like, Todd always lost against Sky, and Grubby always lost against Moon. And I was just like, I'm not gonna stay up till 3-4 a.m. to watch this. I have to go to school at like 9. Tonight I'm not gonna wake up. But obviously, when I woke up, the first thing I did is like I checked either SK Gaming or WC Replays, and I see Todd versus Grubby finals, and like my heart was just like, what? And I even told my mom, and my mom just looked at me like, why would I care about this? Like, how is
this is how you remember.
How is this
match.
interesting? But I remember that Todd won. It was legendary. Like after Grubby beat Moon, he was standing on the table, hands in the air. He was so happy, and then Todd won the tournament. That was pretty insane. It was beautiful.
Great memory.
Now, what about
I'm gonna lose this game. I cannot win against Kevin on guessing this. But go ahead.
what about the WCG in Italy? Who won that one?
Okay, we already know that one. Todd. Oh no, sorry, Sky. Sky. No, Sky won. Todd made it to the finals with him.
Yes, that's correct. I told her this earlier today.
Because I had a feeling you were gonna ask these games, and I was like, I knew Sky won because he won 2 years in a row, but I couldn't remember who faced him in the finals.
Just to give you a small detail about that game, this was one of my favorite Johan Mello memories, and I love Johan. He's probably my best friend in gaming,
I love him too.
together with Mr.
Great.
Bitter. But we all know that he's a little bit of a, like, he likes to describe himself as a D-bag, and he was a little bit of a whiner. And I still remember he played Sky on Twisted Meadows in that final, and Sky had a greater healing potion, which is an okay item, but nothing special. And then Sky beat him, and then Todd said like, yeah, sure, greater healing potion. Like, that was like the last thing in the world you could ever whine about, because it's like there were way better things in the game. And then like later he's like, no, greater healing potion is so imma, man. Like, I could focus his hero, but it would never change a thing because he had a greater healing potion. It was like 500 hit points. But Johan, I love you. I'm sorry.
All right, now let's test what you know now about Warcraft 3. There's still tournaments going on. Who's a recent undead to win WCG? There's an undead player who won WCG
Like recently?
recently.
WCG.
CG, yes.
You already know this answer? Wait, don't answer.
I
I just
am-
want to know if you know it.
I think I know it, but I'm not sure.
Undead.
He was already good in our days, right? Or at least in my days.
Is it Happy?
Is he from China?
Oh,
Is it that?
I was gonna say.
He was actually the only undead to win WCG, and he was the only undead to achieve a 50% win rate against Orc. Oh, let's talk about that. Undead versus Orc.
Pretty balanced if you play Farseer. I think it was a great matchup. I think it was a great matchup with Farseer. Like, Undead had his strengths and Orc had his strengths, but I think it was really exciting. Like, Crypt Fiends were pretty good against the Wolves, and certainly when the Wolves gave 32 XP instead of 20, that was a really big change. And I don't think the matchup was imbalanced. Like, it was okay for Orc, but I don't think it was imba. But yeah, on the Fountain maps with Blade Master, it was a pretty unfair fight.
Oh, speaking of which, there was a recent patch in Warcraft 3 that, not recent, but in the last 3 years, I think, that gave that buffed wolves, and it reverted their XP back to what it was.
Oh my god.
What do you think about that? Do you want to go back to Warcraft 3 right now?
Oh, you don't know how many times I requested and dreamed about that change, because that would have probably still made me the player that I once was. That's the best thing that they could have ever done. That's amazing to hear.
Any comments?
No, I don't have any comments. I haven't. The last time I followed probably Warcraft 3 was 2010. So I don't know if that patch came out then or not.
Yeah, it did. The EU guy, Mike or Mark? Mark was talking about like how he got all the players' feedback and he released that patch and he was so proud of it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, so I think how long are we? Like 25 minutes. It's pretty good. I think we should. Yeah. We're almost out of tape, so we should probably wrap this up now. Do you have any closing thoughts about Warcraft 3, WCS, whatever?
No, just that thank you for doing this interview. It was fun. I really miss Warcraft 3 a lot. I obviously love StarCraft 2 as well, but Warcraft 3 was probably the game that I probably spent the most amount of time and dedication in of every game, any game that you can ever imagine. So, thanks.
Yeah, same here. It was definitely fun to watch Todd's interview about Warcraft. I think it's really cool that you're doing this, even though there are not too many people that are still around that followed Warcraft 3 as intense as maybe you or like we did back then, and that are also interested in now. But I definitely think it's a cool idea. And what Kim said is pretty much the same for me. Whenever people ask me, it's like, StarCraft 2 or Warcraft 3, like I absolutely love StarCraft. I think it's amazing, and it's given me so many good memories already. And it's even been better for me as a person, like on a on a normal level, like outside of just the gaming world. But Warcraft 3 was the game that I just enjoyed more than anything. I could play it for 12 hours straight and still love it, and I watched every single game I could have possibly watched. Of course, back then it was more limited as well, so it was actually doable. In StarCraft 2, that's just not doable because there's too much. But yeah, it was a great game, and I think it's awesome, so thanks for the interview.
This is Mung from Team Liquid signing out. Bye.